One. Hey everyone, welcome to SVT time. It is Tuesday. What is the date? January 9th, the day after Elvis's birthday, by the way. Happy birthday, Elvis. So yeah, this is January 9th, Tuesday, SVT time. Dom, this is episode 62.
62
episodes.
Wow.
For this episode, we're honored and happy to have our good friend James Pulli with us here today. James from Impellitteri fame, recently inducted into the Metal Hall of Fame for 2023. Nice. Am I right there, James?
That is correct. Just recently, last
year. Congratulations, by the way. I mean, you're in some pretty heavy company there as well. So.
Well, thank you for having me and listening to what I have to say.
Yeah, no. That's what listen, this is what this show is all about. Like I said, leading up to this, like, dude, we can talk about basses, we can talk about Ampeg, we can talk about quantum physics.
Oh yeah, that's
good. The show is your oyster.
Food and bass. I think bass, food, amplifications, all that's good. So I'm good.
Exactly. Like I said, two Italians and a Greek log into a live stream. Of course, we're going to talk two Italians and a Greek, all three bass players. We're going to do
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So before we get started, this question was up before I even logged in. So we're going to give, I'm going to butcher his name here, but Jamar, we're going to give kudos to him. He has a question first. Production year of the NS2 with the drop D knob that we have in your profile picture.
Oh, well, thank you, Jamar. So the white one?
I believe that's
the white one is actually a Euro LX. It does have the drop D. So that's not an NS2, but I do have, this is like an old Kramer NS2A.
Yeah.
This is my main weapon right here. In fact, I'm going to keep it really close to me right here. But the white one, I bought the white one as a backup because I would go on tour and I loved the Black Spectre and I needed something as a backup. I would take my P bass, but it wasn't the same. So I needed a backup and I got the Euro LX is what that is, the white one.
Both active, obviously, right? As
what is it?
Both active basses, as all Spectres are. Yeah,
active. I have a funny story to tell you about that if you ever want to hear.
Okay, well, yeah, but so I guess this leads to the next question. Do you prefer? Because I would say like 50% of the photos I see you with the P bass, and the other half are with your Spectre. Do you prefer the Spectre over the P bass, the active over a passive P?
Well, it depends on what you're playing, depends on a lot of different things. If I'm doing like old retro stuff in my tribute band with AC/DC, it's the passive P bass.
Yeah.
But as far as the modern metal, where sometimes you're detuning, sometimes you got to, keep up the wall of guitars and the drums that are just bombastic. You got to have the active bass. So it just depends. It's like a palette of colors you got to choose from, I would say.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, James, tell us about yourself. Like, do you come from a musical family? What was your upbringing like?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was born back east in Pennsylvania. The only, the original musical background I can think of is being in church. Sitting there as a 5-year-old looking up at my mom. My mom was singing. She would be part of the choir. She'd be a cantor. So there was always singing involved, right? I'd go home. My mom would be vacuuming and listening to Mario Lanza or Dean Martin.
Yeah.
So there was always music in the household. As a kid, I was into Bozo the Clown, Banana Splits. Remember that cartoon?
La 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 la.
Banana Split. And, Partridge Family, things like that. So, that was my original influence. But to be more interesting, what I would do, though, is my brother, who's 7 years older than me, he belonged to Columbia House Music Club, where for a penny, you get 13 albums.
Yep.
Right? So I would come home and I'd be listening to Bozo the Clown and Partridge Family. But down the hall, would be my brother's music. He was listening to Led Zeppelin. He was listening to Uriah Heep, Black Sabbath, The Who, Sly and the Family Stone. So I would like creep down the hall without getting caught, and I put my ear up to the door. I'm like, can you imagine hearing Zeppelin for the first time?
Yeah, right.
Immigrant Song or anything like that. It just blew me away. So I was like, that started to intrigue me about music, is hearing my older brother's song selection and all his albums, but especially The Who, Black Sabbath, Uriah Heep, all of that.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the Banana Splits, man. I just had I had a whole I even started singing the song, 1 banana, 2 banana, 3 banana.
Banana buddy saying, coming up to bring you a banana, whatever. It's in my head. It's in my head.
But it's true. I grew up with older brothers and sisters too, and I'm the youngest of 8. So from my oldest sister, spanning from Jim Croce and Carole King, down to my more recent siblings like Van Halen and Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, and I mean, everybody that we've had on the show, it all comes from. That's why I asked that question, because it all comes from their family experience.
I grew up with 3 sisters, and you'd think oh man, what is he going to take from? But my oldest sister was into REM and Soundgarden and some really cool bands. So
that's all good too. REM, love REM.
That
it's songwriting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, did you start off as a bass player, or did school programs, or how did you come to being a bass player?
Well, what happened was, and it really started with hearing Black Sabbath for the first time. I mean, I was maybe 7, 8 years old when Paranoid came out, but everywhere I went, all of my cousins' houses, all of my brother's friends' houses, everyone was playing the Paranoid album. So that kind of worked on me for a few years. And then junior high school, somebody said, hey, this guy in our class knows how to play War Pigs on a guitar. So it seemed funny, but there was a caravan of friends that went to see this guy. I think it was Jim Britton. I don't think he's with us anymore. But we went to his basement and watched him play, our same age. He played War Pigs on the guitar. And I'm like, I want to do that. So I started with guitar, playing guitar, got into a band. The funny thing was, when I got to early high school, there was maybe 4 bands in the high school that played rock and roll, but there was only 1 bass player. And this one bass player tried to spread himself throughout the whole high school. Sometimes he couldn't make gigs or rehearsals. So between me and my buddy Mike Zaremba, we decided I'll play bass half, you play bass half, and we'll get through all this. But I'll tell you, as soon as I got a bass, turned up the bass amp to 10, started playing Pinball Wizard, I'm like, I'll do this.
Yeah.
I'll do this. After that, I took on bass, and that would have been, holy cow, that would have been probably 1980.
Right. Wow.
Just I'll do this. I love it. And because watching Tommy, the movie Tommy, and watching John Entwistle walk down, that church scene with Eric Clapton and
Thunderbird.
And his fingers, wait, where's it? There we go. His fingers are like spiders. I'm like, I don't know what he's doing, but it looks really cool, and I want to do that.
Right? Man, we must have been watching the same thing at the same time.
You guys have the same programming for sure.
Well, that's I remember opening up the album, and that was the photo of them walking down the aisle, and you saw the big Thunderbird headstock in the background.
Yes.
It was like, what is that? What's he playing?
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah.
And I was young. I didn't understand the difference between his bass and guitar and all that, but it made a big impact on me. Big impact.
Yeah. How about you? Let's see, we come from kind of the same era. How about Gene Simmons? Was he a big impact on your decision as a bass player?
Well, I respect him in his songwriting and his, what do you say, his whole overall merchandising and promotion of Kiss. I appreciate that. But there was 2 different camps where I grew up. Okay. There was the guys that like Black Sabbath, Uriah Heep, and Deep Purple, and there was the Kiss Army. And I kind of, my friend would invite me over, listen to this. I'm like, so appreciate them, but not a big fan.
No, I gotcha. I gotcha.
Yeah.
I kind of started the opposite. I started getting into Kiss when I was younger.
It was a spectacle.
But then, and then that's when I started learning about, oh wow, there's other stuff like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and all that. The as they say, the cool kid section.
Right.
Sorry,
right.
Gene. I know he's not watching anyway, so I don't care.
Okay. Sorry, Gene. Hey, Gene, obviously you're successful. I don't need to validate you, but you're doing good.
Right.
You're doing good there, Gene.
He doesn't need my validation. So from there, now we also share something else in common. You went to MI, Musicians Institute.
Yes.
And you graduated in 85. So that means you at that time you probably went in 84 and did the year program, right?
Yes. At the old place.
When it was on Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah. 67, 67, but yeah, Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah.
For sure.
Above the old wax museum.
Yeah. And a great restaurant just down where we had breakfast at and coffee, and it was a great scene.
It was rumored that it was a speakeasy back in Prohibition. And there were like, I don't know. I mean, I had classes over in the old building, but most of my stuff was done on McCadden. But
really? They still had that location?
They had some live playing workshops that you'd go over to the old location. And that's where I learned like it was an old speakeasy. And if you walk around the building, like there's trap doors or secret doors, and the place was haunted. It's like all this other stuff. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go over to McCadden. Yeah. So,
wow. No basis allowed in that building.
No basis. Yeah, it was just. Yeah. I mean, it was this creepy old. It was a creepy old building.
It was crooked, like little teeny narrow hallways.
Yes.
And sitting back home and saying, "Okay, I want to go to MI." And there's a whole story about why I wanted to go to MI. Yep. But now I'll tell you, going to MI, and you had to pick a bass teacher.
Yep.
And I picked. I think it was Rob. Oh. I forget his name, maybe Rob Ferguson, but he was an upright player. Okay,
Bob Ferguson.
Bob Ferguson.
Excuse me, Bob Magnuson.
Bob Magnuson. Thank you. I know I didn't. So he's walking through the hall with his upright bass and going to our lesson. I'm like, Bob, I want to learn upright. He's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. no. I want to play jazz. This is a bastard of an instrument. You don't want to play it. I'm like, okay, all right. So he wasn't the best teacher for what I was trying to learn to do then. Because I really said I wanted to play upright, but that was a funny thing because he was the only guy, him and Putter Smith.
Yep.
Putter would play bebop. He would walk around sometimes with an upright.
Yep.
And I'm like, I want to embrace that. I want to do that. But they talked me out of it. And I'm kind of glad. I mean, I've played upright once, and it was an old Ampeg electric acoustic, right? I bought it from a friend, an old Ampeg, and I did that for a session, and that's my upright experience after that.
So you never pursued it after that?
No. I mean, can you imagine being in Hollywood Boulevard in 85? It was the last thing that was acceptable at that time.
Yeah.
Because then I started looking around, and I'm like, all these metal gigs were going on and all this fun stuff was happening. I'm like, an upright just didn't seem in place for what I wanted to do. So luckily I kind of shunned that and embraced recording and a P bass and just kind of getting more into something that would be more acceptable to most of the music that I was into playing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny you say that because if you think back, like 85 Hollywood Boulevard, that was the era of pointy guitars, actually.
Yeah.
Lots of lights. Amps. Like,
yeah.
How many lights can you get on your preamp and effects units and stuff?
I did the session in LA probably over a decade ago or so, and they were like, we really need upright on a few songs. I was like, oh, mine's on the East Coast. I don't have it shipped here yet. And they rented an upright in for the session, and I literally spent most of the time holding it together. It was actually just like falling apart so badly, and that's hard to play. They're hard to play enough, like when it's a nice one, and it's like it's
right.
Oh,
even a good playing upright, you're gonna hurt, is tough to play,
It's a challenge.
physicality of it.
Challenge.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I remember obviously Bob and Putter and Magnuson was teaching an upright class at the time, and he was Bob's such a sweetheart, such a nice guy, but he's very blunt. Like, no, you don't want to do this.
No, you don't want to play this. Forget it.
Okay. So
I came here for.
Exactly. But Putter, on the other hand, was just the opposite. He was like, no, you should play more upright. You should play more upright. And I took his classes and whatnot, but I didn't start playing upright heavily until I moved back to Boston, and I started studying with Bruce Gertz from Berkeley. And just the opposite. You walk around Berkeley, that's all you see is these guys wheeling. I call them dead bodies, wheeling dead bodies up and down Brookline and Mass Ave. Like
cellos and uprights. Do you remember Putter Smith's counting technique?
Oh, I do. Very much so. One.
They were all like lip things, like clicks and lip things.
Wow.
Yep. I remember him standing in front of the class.
Yeah.
Doing this with the hand signals on.
It
was the funniest thing.
There's 3 people in this class right now. 2 of you may stick with me in 3 months. And he was right. It's like nobody could, but he was brilliant.
Yeah. He definitely was a brilliant guy. I still keep in touch with Putter too, to this day. He's on Facebook. So anybody that's looking, Putter Smith is just he's world class upright player. I
got to check him out. I didn't. Thank God he's still up and playing.
Yep, and Magnuson too. I mean, Magnuson played with Sarah Vaughan for I don't know how many decades.
Right.
So my thing with Magnuson was I had a 9 a.m. music theory class with him on Monday mornings, and it was just music theory. And Bob has this like soothing radio voice.
Yeah.
And at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning after partying all week, and you're talking about flat 5 substitutions, everybody in the class is like,
what? Yeah.
So anyways, so you graduated from MI.
Yeah.
Or now when you were was that around the same time you auditioned for Impellitteri? When you were in MI or after?
Really what happened was I graduated MI. I was, I wouldn't say destitute, but I was struggling. So I said, I'm going to go back home to Pennsylvania, buy a van, get the rest of my music gear, save up a little money and drive back. So I did that. So I came back in 89.
Okay.
And then when I got here in 89, I played a bunch of gigs with other hard rock metal bands. And then I didn't meet Chris Impellitteri and Rob Rock until just before 93.
Okay. All right. How, I got to ask you, man, it's like, I mean, and I know you have an interesting story on this because, I mean, at the time, Impellitteri, and even today, like, how do you, I consider myself a meat and potatoes bass player. And I think you kind of spoke about this going into the audition of, you're the type of guy, great tone, lay it down,
yeah.
Like, how do you prepare mentally and physically going into an audition for somebody like Chris Impellitteri, who is he going to want me to match note for note everything he's doing? Like, how do you prepare for something like that without just being completely petrified?
Yeah. Well, had I known before that exactly who he was and what he had done and where they were going, I would have been more intimidated. But truthfully, all I could do is what I do. So I listened to the music, and I like we do as bass players, just strong, firm playing, really good tone, really good meter, and just played in the pocket and just did what I did.
Yeah.
And I did go beforehand and listen to some of the bass players that were playing there, and they were doing hammer-ons and all the really fast stuff that I didn't do. So I'm like, I'm going to just go in there and do what I do best and what I know. And that's what I did. And luckily that's what they needed. And, to kind of tell you how I look at it, it's like Chris is out in doing his crazy stuff. He needs a rhythm section that just nails it down so he can launch off of that. And that's what I did. Luckily, it was really good tone and solid playing, and that's what got me. Because then he was like, "We're going to audition drummers later today and tomorrow morning. Are you available to come in and do that?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." That's when I knew I was in. I knew I was at that point.
Who was playing drums when you auditioned? Was it Bob Rock?
God. I don't know. We had nobody. They were auditioning drummers as well. So there was like a plethora of drummers that were coming in. So I wish now I would have had the forethought to remember who all these guys were. But for me, I was just, I remember the first time when I walked into that rehearsal room, Mate's rehearsal, and Chris was standing in front of me and he starts playing. I got chills right now. I still have chills. And he was just ripping. And I've never heard anybody play live like that. And then when Rob Rock sang, same thing. It's like, these guys are professionals. These guys are a higher caliber than I was used to in Pennsylvania and MI and even the bands I'd been to in LA. These guys were like world class. So I strive to be supportive of that. Guess that'd be the best way I can put it.
No, that's and that kind of brings you to the point. It's like at some point as kids, as local players playing their local music scene, which we've all done, at some point in our lives and other people's lives, you come to a point where you stop and say, is this it? Or do I move on someplace else and search out better players? Because I want to bet, you know what I mean? That's gravity. I moved to LA, you moved to LA, Don moved to LA. I know people that moved to New York or Nashville in search of not just to make a living, but there's got to be something more. There's got to be something above me that I can reach up to make myself a better player, sort of thing.
You either think that way or you don't. You know, when I was back home, I knew I wanted to move to California, but there's scores of people I grew up with that are still back home playing what they do, and they're happy, and that's fine.
Absolutely.
Totally fine. But I knew there was something more, and the only way to get there was to get back to California.
Yeah.
Where in Pennsylvania, if you don't mind me asking?
Easton, Bethlehem, Allentown, north of Philly by like 70 miles. Home of Larry Holmes, Mack Trucks, Alpo Dog Food, Schaefer Bologna, all the good stuff.
A lot of good
guitars.
I grew up like about an hour outside of
Pennsylvania. You're right, Nazareth, Pennsylvania. Mario Andretti lives right around the corner from, if you're into racing, he lives right around the corner from Martin as well. I have two relatives that work at Martin, Christopher Pulli and, of course, Kimberly Pulli. They both work at Martin Guitars right now.
That's
great place. Great place. Great guitars.
I love Martins.
They don't make basses anymore, though.
No, just they make the little short scale acoustic basses, I think. They still do those.
They do.
I think so. Yeah. I'm gonna ask you a question after this because when we're off air, but I have a very, very, very dear friend that grew up in Easton, PA.
Get out.
And we're all around the same age. And I'm just gonna say this. Do you remember a bar in Easton called Mrs.?
Of course. That was the first place that served me. Oh, Mrs., the steak sandwiches. The steak sandwiches.
That was my buddy's mom and dad's place. And
There we go.
I don't know why it's
4 minutes in and we're on food already. I love it.
This was a whole other segment, but Mrs., I can tell you, all the different steak houses across Easton, but Mrs., I hope my brother's watching. My brother would go to Mrs. every night after his midnight shift, whatever he would do, and he would get Mrs. steak sandwiches.
Yep.
Here's a quick funny story, because I know this, but a little bit of food. I would sit there with my brother. My brother was 7 years older than me. He says, let's go to Mrs. Go to Mrs., sit down at the bar. He's like, we ordered steak sandwiches. And he'd be like, listen, they just opened the stove. I'd be like, what? Clink. Okay, they just put blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. Okay, they're about to come out. 3, 2, 1, and the doors would open, and the Mrs. He had it timed, so he knew exactly when they were cooking. in the oven, bring it out to you. He was like 3, 2, 1, bam. And the doors would open, and there would be your steak sandwich.
Yep. And I remember the one time I went to go visit. His name's Albie Dunbar. He's like a brother to me. And the one time I went down to visit, and we met ironically at MI. He came in like a year after I did at MI. And
no kidding.
Anyways, long story. They had you could get it. A steak sandwich. I think they called it a cheese wop.
Cheese
without peppers.
Although it was a wop.
Exactly. I know we won't go there, but that's the play on words.
And they would write it on the paper plates with a Sharpie, a black Sharpie, cheese wop. They would mark it so you would get a sandwich on a paper plate with a Sharpie marker that said cheese wop.
Cheese wop. See, we've come full circle. We've talked about bases and food.
Look at the bases and food.
We gotta get back to bases though.
Okay, we'll get back to bases.
What were you gonna say, Dom? I'm sorry.
I was just saying it's like a Pennsylvania thing too, because it sounds familiar to Permane Brothers a little bit. Similar vibe.
Yeah, you weren't. I mean, you grew up pretty close to Pennsylvania, being in Eastern Ohio, so you're part of the culture.
I grew up like right outside of Pittsburgh, so yeah.
Oh, I have relatives in Sandusky. I think they're kind of in that area.
Yeah.
Too funny, man.
It's all the same culture right there, man.
Yeah.
Everybody that's watching, I got to say, this is like a family reunion. We've never actually met one another, so.
It is.
Two Italians and a Greek log into a live stream. What's going to happen? I should have gone into comedy because I suck as a bass player at this point.
That's not what I hear. I don't know.
It's not true.
No, I am very, and that I should comment, like that's one of the things that actually I think a lot of us need to get out of is self-condemning, and I do it myself quite a bit. But it's like we hear other guys, players, colleagues, people in the industry. You know what I mean? A lot of times, I suck or this and that, but. Even jokingly, I think it was Bruce Lee that said,
"Yeah, he did." Yeah.
Do you remember the quote, Tom? It was like stop doing that.
Yeah.
You're convincing yourself internally, even if you're joking, you're convincing yourself internally. So, anyway,
I'm pretty confident. But then I'll say to my wife, and she's like, "Well, look what," or I'll say, "He's with this band or he's with them," and she's like, "You're better than him." I'm like. You know who you're talking about? I'm like, okay, you don't know, but thank you for the confidence. Right. But who's got Rick Ferbracci lives near me, and I love Rick Ferbracci, amazing bass player. And she's like, "You're better than him." I'm like, "Well, thank you, honey. I really enjoy your enthusiasm for it, but you kind of have to know, but you have to stay that way. You have to be like." But even Rick has he's complimented me on a couple of things that I do when I played with him.
Sure.
And so it's like we all have our things that are really good. And like I said, I auditioned for Impellitteri, and I didn't play like and do all the stuff, but because I played bass, it started a whole career for me, really, 30 years ago. Without that start, I mean, I don't know where I would have been, but it's opened up a ton of doors for me since then.
So
basically.
So I'm going to ask both of you, because we've all been on auditions, and for anybody that's watching that's been on audition, when you're preparing for an audition, whether it's a wedding band or whether it's a national act, is it better to go in? I'm going to say this the wrong way, so don't be offended by this. But do you go in and be yourself? Even to a fault, like, hey, this is what I do, this take it or leave it sort of attitude, and do it the best, better than anybody? Or do you try and take on a persona that you may think the gig is calling for, like in the case of Impellitteri? Like, some guys might go in and think, yeah, he wants all this two-handed tapping stuff, but when in reality, he wants somebody that's just going to lay it down and can follow him on. You got to have the chops too. There's no question about that. But you know what I mean? Like, do you take on this persona thinking, well, this is what they want. It's not who I am, but this is what they want. So I'm going to kind of try and fool them into thinking
Mhm.
I'm what they want.
Don, what do you think?
I'm like try to stick to like an 80-20 rule of like 80%. Well, in terms of like if there's a recording, it's like 80% of that recording, and then I insert 20% of my persona or my playing or whatever. Maybe that's during the fills, unless there's like a super hooky, notable fill in a song that it's like, okay, you don't mess with that. That's but yeah, I try to be like enough to where it's noticeable that I'm playing and not somebody else is playing, and it's just like a different version of it, but it still has the essence of whatever it is.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point.
What do you think, James?
I've gotten a lot of it, or snagged the gig out of a lot of auditions, and not as just as many. So who knows? Honestly, I feel like ones that I didn't, it was like I didn't have to play anything. When I walked in, I was just like, yeah, I'm not the right vibe for this. Like, and that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Package.
Exactly.
And
yeah, you know, if you're gonna add to it or not, I'll tell you, out here in LA, there's a lot of tribute bands. So the ease is you just play what was on the record, no problem. But when you're doing somebody's original music, I had this recently, a file sent where this guy played keyboard bass. He says, I want you to play exactly like that. And it was really awkward on bass. Like if you compose something on keyboard and then try to play it, you guys probably know it's not easy.
As hard as when a guitarist who's playing bass does fill. And you're like, what?
You wouldn't play it like that. But so I said, look, I'll do this. I'll do it as close as possible. But let me send you a file of what I would normally play if you just send me the chord chart kind of thing. And so I think you have to mold yourself to whatever the gig is. You know, if you're auditioning for someone and you're replacing a bass player, I'd say do the best you can to sound like the original recordings, but then throw a little something in there to show like, I hear what the drummer's doing and I'm going to do this with them. But 80-20, I think is a great rule there, Dom.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just like I said, it's always a question, you know, like I said, when you're auditioning for anybody, really, you know, and I've gone on plenty of auditions, the same thing, you know, and it's funny because, you know, back in those days, I mean, I remember I auditioned for Cher. I auditioned for, you know, but it was kind of like, oh, he's too Greek, or he's too tall, or he's too fat, or he's too skinny, or his hair's not long enough, or his hair's not short.
Well, Image was big for a while there.
Image was big, you know, and at that point, you know, if you get called for an audition versus a cattle call, if you get called for an audition, it's pretty much already a given that, yeah, the dude can play the parts.
Yeah.
It's just, is he going to fit? Is he going to look the part? Is he going to be the Johnny Bravo? Brady Bunch.
Exactly.
But you know what I mean? Yeah, it was just kind of, and obviously you do your homework. You know what I mean? You learn the songs, like you said, when you did a little bit of backstory there and learn the songs and knew what you were going into. And yeah, man.
The biggest thing that threw me for a curve on one particular audition was they wanted, and I should have thought about this and I didn't. I was very young and inexperienced at the time in terms of this. I had like just gotten to LA, and there were so many rogue live versions of these songs. And it was for Dwight Yoakam, actually. And there were so many rogue live versions that they were used to doing for years and years and years. And I was just like, inside the recordings left and right, and like knew those, which actually hurt me because they were doing all these different little changes and harmony differences and everything. And I'm like really into it. It was at Capitol, and I'm in Studio A, and we're in there playing with the band, and I'm like, man, this band sounds good. And I was just like, in the moment of it, thought I was nailing it, and I look over at the drummer, and he's just like points to me while he's playing and is like, get on the mic, like, why are you not singing these new harmonies? And I was like, I don't know what these harmonies are, because it was like their live version. And I was like, oh man.
That's something to know beforehand. Like, you got to do the harmonies too. It's like,
yeah, right. Yeah, that would be good to know.
And they didn't give you any instruction. It was like, here's the rehearsal, or I'm sorry, here's the audition. Show up at this time, and he's like got a massive catalog, and they're just like, you can play everything.
Yeah.
So that was,
you got to learn all of it. That's like
tough. That was tough. And you got to learn all of it, and all the live,
and all the harmonies and vocals and stuff too. That's crazy.
You're a better man than me to even go there, Dom.
Right?
I think we waited like, I think it was 6 hours after the call time, that like the slot that they gave you to actually audition. They were like taking forever on keyboard.
Oh, that's crazy.
The keys player too, and that was a day. It was a long day.
That's a great gig, though. I mean, if you can throw down and get that gig, man, you're set for a while.
Yeah.
The guy that was stepping down, who had played for years and years, played a lot of upright, toured a lot with him. He was getting shoulder surgery because of all of it. He was like, "Yeah, I think I'm out at this point."
Yeah, right. Yeah, after touring for 50 years.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh
man. So James, tell us about the Metal Hall of Fame, being inducted into that.
Sure. Well, it blindsided me. I wake up every day, I drink my coffee with my wife and my cat, and I open up my computer and I go to Blabbermouth and see what's going on in the metal and music world, and it said Chris Impellitteri being inducted into the Metal Hall of Fame. I'm like, I know that guy. So I called him up, like, Chris, what the heck is going on? He's like, yeah, we're getting inducted. And the thing that was important to me was I asked him, are we going to play? Do we get to play?
Right.
He's like, yeah, I think we're going to play 3 songs. So we kind of had to form a band together. We got, of course, Chris playing guitar. I played bass. We had another guitar player because we didn't have a keyboard player. So Sean Culligan, who's the rhythm guitar player, he's the Malcolm in my AC/DC tribute band Bonfire. Okay. He played rhythm guitar. Great guy. And we got Mark Zonder playing drums, who lives not too far down the street from Fates Warning. Okay. So he played drums, and we put a little band together and played a few songs. But it was like a shock to me. And then I was told, our manager Giles said, yeah, you're getting an award too. I'm like, so I had to write a speech and accept it as well. But the good thing too is right down here, not far from Yamaha Ampeg Line 6, in right there at the Canyon Club. It was right at the Canyon Club. I could walk there. So it was an amazing night. All kinds of peers, people you look up to. We got to play. It was a highlight, really, of my life. It was cool. really a big thing.
Awesome.
That is cool. And of course, you asked Chris for a raise after that, right?
Oh yeah.
All right, double up.
Yeah. Now you're also working on a bunch of other things too, and I'm gonna post some links here as well. But
okay,
is it okay to post a link to the Metal Mastication cooking show?
Please do. Yeah, we have a new show Thursday. Thursday's a new show. I'm one of the executive producers on it because it was so much fun. So we're gonna have another one.
I'm gonna post a link here. Let me see if I can do this with
the new one's going to be Robbie Lochner from Great White.
So Dom, I know you were on the email thread as well, but I was watching. Is Haji posting these? I don't know. Anyways, this is the link to Metal Mastication where you cook your I'm going to say it's your family recipe for lasagna.
In a way.
I know we're going back to talking food again, but
it's mixing the metal industry with cooking.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I imagine Rudy's all over that. Isn't Rudy like cookaholic here?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I did the pilot. Now we have the second show Thursday. Okay. So we're hoping we're going to, get some traction and generate some interest. But it was a lot of fun. It was a ton of fun.
That's a great idea.
There's actually a cookbook that I contributed a couple of recipes to a few years ago. That's all bass players' recipes.
Get out!
I'll post the link when I can find it here too. It's on my bookshelf here. But I was just thinking,
that's cool.
If you're having metal bass players on, another Ampeg artist that you should look at too is Tanya O'Callahan.
Oh, yeah.
She
cooked.
She does, and I know I'm going to butcher this, but she does this cooking show that she's a hardcore vegan. So she's got all these amazing vegan recipes that she's always posting on her social channels. And every time I see her, it's like, you're going to have to teach me how to do that. Cause I'd burn a soybean and, it's like, anyway.
Is she LA, or do you know where she is?
She's based,
Joshua Tree, like LA-ish.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So at some point we'll do an introduction online and, get her on the show. She'd be a blast to have too.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. It's fun. It's fun. Food and music.
Yeah. Oh, it's again, it's part of the Mediterranean lifestyle. It's just food and music.
I think that the episode with her, you should have the original cheese wop, and she has to make a vegan version of it.
Oh,
there you go.
Right.
Wow. Challenge Ellen. Yeah.
Let's see.
So we're gonna switch here now. So let's talk. we got to talk about gear, because otherwise our sponsors.
I love talking about gear, music, and cooking.
Absolutely. So, what is your amp du jour? What's your go-to amp when you're touring?
Especially an SVT VR that I've had for a long time, since they came out, really, and I still load it into my car almost every weekend and drive it to the gigs. And sometimes you show up at a gig and they're looking at you funny. So I always mess with the sound guy. I'm like, I got 3 of these. Where can I an 810 with an SVT VR head. I just love it. In fact, I've A/B'd it for recording with that in my old MTI era blackface.
Yep.
And the VR sounded better to me. Maybe there was something going on with the MTI. I don't know, but the modern Ampeg stuff I still use for just putting a 421 up to it, cranking it up, and it sounds great. So that's really what I use. I use mostly for the AC/DC band. It's my old 66 P bass.
Okay, nice.
And because I don't like flying with it all the time, I've got horror stories anytime you want to hear it. But I use this. And if you look, Cliff Williams used a version just like this in his first American tour with AC/DC. So I have this one as a backup. Okay. I use it most of the time, especially on fly gigs.
Okay.
But for the most part, for that kind of stuff, it's my P-Bass and the SVT VR. As far as metal, it's definitely the Spectre.
Yep.
The NS2A with an upgraded preamp. Now, at the time when I bought it, right after I joined Impellitteri, I didn't know anything about this stuff. He's like, you got to get something with EMGs. You got to get an SVT. He's just like, okay, he's my boss. I'm going to do it. So I did. I got an SVT, learned how to use it. I got this, and I did not know that this was a gem. This has an upgraded preamp in it. And there was one point where I joined the Spectre Nation group and said, hey, guys, I don't know much about this, but can you tell me more about it? And I sent a picture of the preamp. They're like, whoa, you got a killer preamp, brass nut. This is like this is something everybody wants to have. Unobtainable, they said, unobtainable. But it's true. This bass, when I plug this into the SVT and crank it up, it's got the best growl and the best articulation, and sometimes we tune down a step and a half.
Sure,
a step.
Wow.
Pretty common. Sometimes drop the E, to a D.
Yeah.
But anytime I can detune this to whatever, and it's still articulate, punchy, sounds great with the SVT. Yeah. So this is the metal bass, but for most other things, I'll use. If there's not a wall of guitars on recordings I'm doing, this cuts through really well, sometimes with round wounds, sometimes with flat wounds. But one guy said this bass commands the mix. You can see I still have it taped because I just did a recording. I don't want to mess with the tone because it was like perfect.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. So you'll switch between round wounds and flats on the 66?
Yes, because working with this remote recording deal, the websites I deal in, sometimes it's not a wall of guitars. Sometimes it's not metal. Sometimes it's just, a cool bluesy thing, or even jazzy or funky thing, and flat wounds, you don't want that buzz.
Yeah.
And I've never used flat wounds until one day I was like, well, I want to use what Steve Harris is using. So I ordered Steve Harris's string set, and I had no idea they were flat wound, and they're huge. They're huge. So I wound up putting those on one of my basses, and it's on this bass.
Yeah, I think Steve runs like 110 to 50.
Oh wow,
roto sounds.
Yeah,
it's like telephone wires.
Everything about the bass, but it really it has that tone. It really cuts through. It's not really super twangy. It just has that punch. So,
yep.
You know, the funny thing. Sometimes my wife says, "What do you need all these basses for?" I'm like, "What do you need all those shoes for?" It's like shoes, right? It's like this shoe goes with this dress. So these basses, they each have a very, very particular role in the recordings I'm doing. And sometimes I'll get a file for something I got to play to, and I'll try 4 or 5 basses. I have an idea what I think will be best, but when I try them out, it's like, wow, that surprises me. The Mexican jazz bass with flat wound sounds better than my 66 round wound P bass. So it's all about context, I guess.
My wife asked me that question one time when there was
your shoes?
No, about my basses. Yeah, about my shoes. We had a contractor in the house, a buddy of mine. I says, "Hey, Joey, how many hammers do you have in your truck?" He says, "What are you talking about?" I says, "How many hammers do you have in your truck?" He says, "I got about, I don't know, 5 or 6 different hammers." It's all for different things, right? Yeah. So, for claw hammer for this and a sledgehammer. Yeah. And I just looked at it, I said, I just went like, and never again.
Hey, good thing he did. If he was just like, I just use one hammer.
No, I knew he had. I made sure he had more than one hammer. And I just got this one hammer. It does it all.
But the craftsman I use for everything. Why?
Thanks, Joe. You're fired.
My wife is very understanding. She's totally supportive, understands. She hears it. I was like, honey, come here, listen to this. And I'll say, this is what I wrote for this. And she gets it, understands it. Thank God. Yeah. So I let her buy as many shoes as she needs.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
Right.
That's
right. You got to proactively be like, you know what? I think you need some new shoes. What do you need? A month later.
Yeah. That's my funny thing is like, honey, is that a new bass? No, I've always had that.
Yeah. Well, like my brother gave me a wise word of advice a long time ago. He says, if you're going to spend X amount of dollars on a motorcycle part or a bass, let's say it's $1,000, budget $2,000 because your wife is going to go spend $1,000. and I got to say, my wife has never done that. I'm blessed for that reason, but it's always like, if I'm going to spend $500, I'm going to expect to spend $1,000 because it's got to balance out in the end there,
including the price.
So yeah. So when you're working with your Sabbath band or the AC/DC band, do you have your own front of house guy, or is it dependent on the club? Because the reason why I'm asking this is how do you confront front of house guys when they see you wheeling an SVT and they're just like, "Oh, you're not one of those guys, are you?"
It's all about being confident in what you do, and most of it is with the AC/DC band. Our rhythm guitar player Sean Culligan, our lead player Diego Russo, they go out front. They generally may not use a wireless all the time, but they'll go out front with the sound guy and we'll play. And they're like, is that flat? That's always the question. Is it flat? Because if the EQ is flat, we're okay. If they start coloring it or there's something wrong with their PA, it's not going to happen. Yeah. So we have enough confidence in our sound that like just put a mic up to it and crank it up. It's going to be good.
Yeah.
So as far as when sound men give me a funny look, it's like I just tell them this is my go-to. There is no substitute. I could bring something else in. I've got other guys my age that I know in tribute bands, and they bring this little light stuff in. I'm like, there's no substitute. This is going to sound better. And of course, the sound man usually is like, that's the best sounding band I've heard. If you hear our band play, we really recreate the early AC/DC tones with vintage equipment and sound and energy, and it does really cut through. And most people understand it as being like powerful, different than anybody else that's just going to, get up there with a Marshall with a bunch of distortion or whatever, a bass amp that doesn't pay attention to what the real tone is.
I was just looking. It's called Bonfire, the AC/DC, and Sabbath Show is the Sabbath Show.
Sabbath Show is a Sabbath Show.
Okay, cool.
Sabbath Show, that is fun. If you can imagine playing the whole Paranoid album at full volume with two other guys that really know what they're doing, like we check each other. It's like, dude, that was an F sharp. Like, no, I don't think it was. No, listen. And we like go after each other. It's like, we try to get as authentic as possible. And I've seen other, Black Sabbath bands. I'm like, Geezer doesn't play that during Fairies Wear Boots. That is not what he plays. I know that. And you just walk away. But we are really committed to doing it as accurately as possible. When you watch the 70s Paris show with Sabbath, doing all those songs, like we try to recreate that as much as possible, because that really is the beginning of amazing energy for metal. And you got a metal guitar player and a jazz drummer, and these are doing what he does. Just an amazing conglomeration that if you want to do it right, you got to know just what they're playing. So we pride ourselves on Sabbath Show and doing it as closely as possible to what they did in the 70s.
Yeah. That's
totally matters for fans, like people that are seeking that out. They don't want you to play a little mini rig because they want to experience what it was back then to have a full monster rig anyway. On top of just all those little nuances. I'm a huge Police fan, and I would pay attention to all those little details, and I would absolutely have a Police tribute band if I could sing high enough. but I
know the story that he bought a bass at a thrift store and then played it that night at his first show. Have you heard that?
I have heard a similar story of that.
That's crazy. I mean, well, yes, he played upright, so he but buying a fretless bass and then that night going to the gig and playing the whole Police set with a fretless bass for the first time that
you just bought that day.
Playing like punk with a fretless. It was crazy.
That too. Yeah.
I think a lot of people underestimate. I shouldn't say a lot of people. I know I did underestimated like Sting's actual influence on a lot of bass players. And for lack of a better word, I guess his prowess. But again, bringing up, perfect example of playing and singing at the same time. That's a huge thing.
Syncopated, some pretty syncopated lines, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
Man, so I know we're coming down to the wire here, so I want to get this in before we finish. So,
sure.
The rapid fire.
Let's
go.
So, and I didn't put this in the original email, but that's
okay.
It's been such a while since I've done this. Where's Dino's rapid fire? Did I lose it? Oh no. Oh, here it is. Okay.
These like off the cuff questions, like first response.
Just like real quick questions. You gotta first whatever comes to your mind first. They're all bass related.
And then there's no wrong answers.
Oh, then it'll be easy.
Yeah, there's no wrong answers here. Okay, so you ready?
Yep.
P bass or jazz bass?
P bass mostly.
Okay. Passive or active?
Passive.
Okay. Rounds or flats?
Rounds mostly.
Okay. B15 SVT or Pro Series or Venture Series?
SVT at the moment.
Okay. All right. Cable or wireless?
Always cable. I never use a wireless.
Okay. Pick or fingers?
Oh, half and half. Depends.
Of course. IEMs or floor wedges?
Oh, floor wedges.
Okay. Pedals or no pedals?
My pedal is my cable.
Okay. All right.
I'm but that's I don't have any pedals.
No, that's all right. And you're part of the old school there because everybody's got to build a pedal board these days.
A story about pedals, but we only have 2 hours or whatever.
Right. Okay. Travel questions. Window or aisle?
I like aisle. I use the bathroom a lot. As we get older, use the bathroom.
Trust me, I know.
Right down.
High bunk or low bunk?
I always try to be above.
I was gonna say, don't ask me where I came up with
The
that.
high ground.
The high ground.
High ground.
And last question: black with white piping or silver and blue, like the Anniversary series?
Oh, silver with blue.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm an aisle person too. You need that extra leg space, man, because you're not getting it otherwise.
The only detriment is you get knocked with the cart every once in a while, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay.
Yeah.
I can get up and out if I need to, then I'm fine with that.
Yep, I'm the same way. I'm an aisle guy. I gotta get up and walk up and down the aisle and see what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
So all right. So you got. I know I'm a pedal guy. I know Dom's a pedal guy, but there's times where I wish I wasn't a pedal guy, where it was just like, you know what, I'm just going to take my cable and plug it directly into my. So I know you said you had a story.
I'll do it quick.
Yeah.
All right. So when I was a guitar player, and that was for a very, very short time of my life, I used pedals, but now it's really just my P bass, a cable into my SVT, and just crank it up, kick ass.
Yep.
But I joined a band. It was a Robert Plant solo band called Robert Plantation, and the singer Swan Montgomery from Led Zeppelin, he was fronting it. He asked me to join the band. I was like, there's a lot of stuff to do, but I started learning the music. I had to play fretless live, and I had to buy 7 pedals, reverb, an octaver, a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, but I knew it would grow me. I knew that it would expand my horizons. So I bought all the pedals and we played some great live shows, and I'm so thankful for it. But that was the only time I really used pedals. And it was a really, really good experience. Especially, it happened during COVID, so I had to learn to be comfortable playing fretless live. And now I'm more comfortable with it. So it was a good thing.
There you go. So you did use pedals on that specific gig because that's what the gig called for.
Yeah, with the fretless, because here's my my advice to anybody out there is that you don't rely on the sound guy, because when you're going to a gig, you don't know. So I wanted to make sure I had my own chorus and reverb on some of that fretless stuff.
Yep.
Ship of Fools and some of the other stuff. So I wanted to make sure at least it's coming out of where bass is going in. You're going to hear some reverb and chorus. So yeah, I did that. Plus I had 4 or 5 different basses. So I had an EQ I could step on that changed the EQ for each bass.
Yeah.
Because they're very different. These basses, they're very different. I would love to plug them in, put them up to 10 and be done, but they're very, very different. So I had to have a different EQ for each bass. So that pedal, reverb, chorus, octaver, my Sanzam pedal, couple others, but that was it.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Now it's just, again, back to everything else I do, my bass, cable, SVT, I'm done.
There you go. Yeah.
That's definitely the way to go if you can do it.
Exactly. Yeah. If the gig calls for it.
Right. Well, it's like how many pedals did Geezer Butler have? Okay, he had a wah-wah. So I did use a wah for the Sabbath show.
Oh, cool.
That's okay.
Use a wah.
We'll let that go. and I will say, I remember I had to cover the intro to NIB one time.
Right.
Using the wah. And I'm a bass player. How often do you rock a wah while you're playing?
Yeah.
That's freaking hard.
It's not natural. I don't know. I would love, a video of him with his foot. There is none, but
there is.
Recent.
It's with him and with Heaven and Hell with Ronnie James Dio.
Oh, okay.
He's playing the intro, and they do close up on his foot while he's rocking the wah. It's not for very long, but they do show up. But I was like, man, that is so unnatural playing da 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 da. And yeah. So, anyways, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah.
Man, James, we could talk another.
I was gonna say, are we already at time? What the heck?
Exactly.
We got more dishes to cover. I want to know
marinara sauce or Spanish.
Well, that was going to be my next question, and I know what you call it, but is it sauce or gravy?
It's sauce. It's sauce. I know. I have these. One time, a heated argument. I think sauce comes from Italy, but gravy comes from like New York. I mean, I was close to New York, but I never myself, my godmother, my mother, nobody ever called it gravy. So it's soft.
Yeah, I'd get hit with a wooden spoon if I called it gravy.
Yep. Deservedly.
Yeah.
It's just different areas. That's all.
Oh man. Well, listen, James, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, man. I feel like literally, like with Dom and I, it feels like we're talking to our brother, for crying out loud. You know,
let's do it again tomorrow.
Hey, if anybody's around and you want to join in, let me post this real quick. Thank you, Haji.
Thanks, Haji.
Post your website here, and then I will post your Instagram, and these will be available to re-watch tomorrow too. So if you need the Instagram, hold on, wrong one. There we go. Thank you, Paul. But man, thank you so much for joining us today, and
thank you, Dino.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks, and we'll see you at NAMM, I'm assuming.
Yeah, going to NAMM, and I'll be there for the open house for Yamaha Ampeg Line 6, all of that.
Perfect.
Thanks for listening to me, Dom. A real pleasure.
Very nice
I'll see you at NAMM as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll see you at the open house as well. I'll be there.
Great to talk bass and food and all that.
Bass and food, man. Haji, thank you for being in the background posting those too. Thank you, Aaron. I know you're not feeling well. You're not with us today, but hope you feel better. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I see a lot of familiar names that tune in every single week. Paul and Jeremiah had a bunch of comments here, but man, thank you guys. Steve Tudbury as well, all from the UK, I think too. So everybody, thanks for watching. We'll be back I think we're going to be back in 2 or 3 weeks. We're going to try and do a live broadcast, a live SVT time from the open house in Calabasas.
Oh, nice.
With Vincent Garcia, who's been kind of just blowing up everywhere. So we'll keep an eye open for advertisements for that. Until next time, everyone, we'll see you soon. Be safe.